already.
That was the voice of former Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio citing a two-decade-old case against presidential aspirant Bongbong Marcos. Carpio was referring to a tax evasion case against Marcos Jr. for which he was convicted in 1995.
Marcos then was ordered to pay fines and was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. But a Court of Appeals decision 2 years later only required him to pay fines without jail time. Question is, can this serve as basis to disqualify Marcos from running for public office? Good evening, I'm Gretchen Hall.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. That conviction, says former Justice Antonio Carpio, may serve as grounds to disqualify Marcos from running in next year's elections.
Carpio is now looking at the possibility of filing a petition before the Commission on Elections to do just that. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to the big story.
The candidacy of presidential aspirant Bongbong Marcos may run afoul of a tax case that is 2.5 decades old. Retired Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio says former Senator Bongbong Marcos could be disqualified from public office because he was convicted of tax evasion in 1995. Carpio says the regional trial court found Marcos guilty of failing to pay income taxes from 1982 to 1985, when he was still governor of Ilocos Norte.
Marcos Jr. has been convicted of non-payment of tax or non-filing of income tax returns.
Marcos was ordered to pay taxes and penalties and sentenced to 7 years in prison. The Court of Appeals upheld the conviction in 1997 but merely ordered him to pay the fines with no mention of jail time. Carpio says he found that curious since violations of the tax code required both a fine and imprisonment. Carpio says the conviction could be grounds for disqualification under the Omnibus Election Code since it could be considered a crime involving moral turpitude.
Moral turpitude is an act that is against accepted norms. It's considered to be some sort of vileness.
Carpio says missing 1 year may still be excusable, but missing 4 consecutive years of tax payment could make it intentional.
So, pag nakalimutan mo lang, it's not moral turpitude. Pero if you do it every year, mukhang ano na yan. It's now up to the court to decide. If you do it every year, that's really intentional already.
Carpio is considering filing a petition with the Commission on Elections to disqualify Marcos based on his conviction for tax evasion. But Carpio acknowledges that it would be up to the judgment of the COMELEC and Bank. Other candidates may also be inclined to file similar petitions, and Carpio says one should expect the case to reach the Supreme Court. One News tried to reach out to the Marcos camp to no avail. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
Here are other election stories we're watching. Despite repeatedly denying that she will be gunning for a national post, supporters of Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte held a national caravan urging her to run for president. The group Run Sara Run is confident that she may still change her mind come November 15. That's the last day of substitution. In Cebu, presidential hopeful Manny Pacquiao said running for vice president instead is not an option. This after Senator Amy Marcos said her brother Bongbong Marcos is looking and considering Pacquiao to be his running mate. In a visit at the marker of Father Rudy Romano, a desaparecidos during the Marcos regime, Pacquiao said the dark days of martial law should never be forgotten. In Pampanga, Manila Mayor Isko Moreno continues to vow to cut oil and power taxes by half. He is also promising to help small businesses recover through the Mandanas ruling. It will allow local governments to have a share not only of internal revenue taxes but also national taxes. And in Albay, Vice President Leni Robredo turned over the 3 million peso Lambaclad project to fishermen. Aside from the fishnets, Robredo also turned over 2 units of fiberglass motorized boats worth 1 million pesos. She then went to Cagraray Island to turn over 2 million pesos worth of fish cages, fiberglass boats, and fish stocks.
Eligible voters are camping outside malls to be able to register as the extension deadline looms. Justin Punsalang with the story.
People spent the night outside the mall in Manila to secure a spot for voter registration. Only 2 days remain before the Commission on Elections officially closes the extension. In Robinson's Otes, only 150 people were supposed to be accommodated. But since around 300 people flocked the mall, registrants listed down the names of the first ones in queue to prevent others from cutting in line.
Pagdating namin, meron na nito. Pero dati na talaga gumagawa ng ganito para walang gulo yung pila.
Helen Lar, the first in line, said she camped by the mall as early as 1 p.m. yesterday. She said it took her 5 attempts before finally getting herself registered as a voter.
Nung mga nakaraang buwan, ma'am, simula September, alas 2, alas 3, wala na.
But if Helen is now registered, Alexis Tantay, a gasoline boy, will have to return tomorrow. He arrived past 4 a.m. and was number 271 in line. Tantay hopes the registration will once again be extended and capacity restrictions eased.
Mas maganda siguro kung dadagdagan nila yung 150. Gawin nilang 300.
Meanwhile, in SM Novaliches in Quezon City, people have lined up since 6 p.m. last night. They brought chairs and tarpaulins to sit on as they wait for the registration to start.
Busy din po kasi ako sa schoolwork po kasi. Kasi nung mga nakaraan din po, di rin po kami nabutan ng nung bago po mag-cut-off.
Just like in Manila, registrants also organized the lines to prevent newcomers from cutting in. Minimum health protocols were hardly implemented. COMELEC is reminding registrants to bring their filled-out forms, valid IDs, and their own pen and alcohol. Wearing face masks and face shields are also required. For News 5, Justine Punsalang. We are One News.
These are the other big stories tonight. Despite a downtrend in infections, the Philippines remains dead last in Bloomberg's resiliency ranking. Government itself is not sugarcoating pandemic damages, pegging total cost to the economy at 41 trillion pesos. Tens of thousands rushed to visit their dearly departed a day before cemeteries closed for the observance of All Souls Day. Some opted to do it the pandemic way by going virtual. And in case you haven't heard, you can now add some tunes on your Facebook profile and Instagram stories. More of these big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The challenges of daily commute in Metro Manila is almost back to pre-pandemic levels after the capital eased to alert level 3.
This, says the Transportation Department, is one more reason to finally return to 100% capacity in public transport. Marian Enriquez has the story.
At around 6 p.m., commuters start to swamp this bus stop in EDSA Ayala southbound. 63-year-old Irene fell in line at 4 p.m. and was able to ride a bus 2 hours after.
Sana mag-normal na yung panahon para hindi na kami mahihirapan. Sobra na.
Angel, who's working in Makati, had to endure an hour and a half waiting for a bus.
Imbes na nasa bahay ka na't nagpapahinga, dito ko pa naghihintay ng masasakyan ng pauwi.
The long line of passengers sometimes reaches the footbridge in the Ayala-EDSA intersection. The situation gets worse when it's raining.
Sa bandang dulo po tayo, kasi po yan, bilang po yan.
Due to rush hour, some buses admit that they are forced to take in more than the allowed 50% passenger capacity.
Kami lang po yung naawa sa pasahero, ma'am, sa sitwasyon ngayon, ma'am. Kanina pa sila nakatayo, yung iba, nagipagsiksikan na lang po, ma'am.
The Transportation Department wants 100% passenger capacity for public utility vehicles.
Dahil ng pagbabago ng Alert Level 3, alam naman po natin na marami na pong taong pinapayagan na lumabas po at pumasok sa trabaho at meron parang limited percentage para ho sa turismo. Ito po yung nais nating matugunan.
For the National Center for Commuter Safety and Protection, the root problem can also be traced back to the implementation. Another problem is a series of oil price hikes.
Can you imagine, 2 rides ka pa, imbis na dati 1 ride ka lang? The solution really is to sit down and create a seamless travel system.
The DOTR is in talks with the IATF to allow the 100% passenger capacity in PUVs. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
A big number for you tonight, 41.4 trillion pesos. That is how much the COVID-19 pandemic will cost the Philippines. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez with the story.
How much will the COVID-19 pandemic cost us in the long run? Economic Secretary Carl Chua has crunched the numbers, and it's not looking pretty.
The long-run total costs of COVID-19 and the quarantines to present and future total costs of 41.4 trillion in net present value terms.
That's based on the idea that consumption and investment will be lower over the next decade, given social distancing measures. Chua also shot down the proposal for more cash aid through Bayanihan 3.
If you give a stimulus, then there should be a way for the people to spend it. But if you lock down the economy continuously in various levels, then there would be little opportunity for that stimulus to be used.
The Health Department has said NCR may be downgraded from Alert Level 3 to 2 soon, given the decline in daily cases.
So by moving from Alert Level 3 to Alert Level 2, we can improve upon our GDP by 10.3 billion per week and reduce the number of unemployed by around 43,000 per week.
Chua says the economy can recover to pre-pandemic levels by the end of 2022, but other economists aren't convinced.
The Philippines suffered one of the worst economic contractions in 2020, and government forecasts it will take at least a decade to recover from the deep economic scarring due to its poor pandemic management.
Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, we are One News.
Despite the country's downtrend in cases lately, it's still at the rock bottom of Bloomberg's COVID resilience ranking. The Philippines is now ranking 53rd with a score of 40.5. Southeast Asian nations are all at the bottom of the ladder as well. Indonesia at 48th, Malaysia 50th, Thailand 51st, and Vietnam 52nd. Bloomberg says the country fares among the worst on vaccine coverage, with just 26% of the population covered. Another factor for its low score is the banning of kids in malls and restrictions on international travel, which the report says is a very conservative approach. Heads up for Metro Manila and Cavite residents. Maynilad is set to implement a water service interruption starting tomorrow until November 1 as part of pipe realignment projects. Around 3 million customers will be affected by several hours of water interruption. This will include residents of Las Piñas, Makati, Parañaque, and Pasay, as well as Bacoor, Cavite City, Imus, Kawit, and Noveleta. Maynilad says it will deploy 65 mobile water tankers to help with water supply.
Itinuloy na natin ito ngayon at hindi na pwede sanang mai-move pa ulit kasi importante itong DPWH project nila. Kasi di ba madalas ang pagbaha dun sa Sampaloc area, so dapat na-implement na ito agad.
For the big story in sports, in the PBA, Magnolia Hotshots Calvin Abueva was named the best player of the PBA Philippine Cup. Announced before tip-off of Game 4 of the finals, Abueva received his second career Best Player of the Conference award. In 19 games, Abueva averaged 15.2 points, 10 rebounds, and 2.8 assists, edging out fellow BPC frontrunners Ian Sanggalang and TNT rookie Mikey Williams. The Magnolia forward garnered 934 points compiled from statistics and votes from the PBA press corps, players, and the commissioner's office. Meanwhile, in the NBA, the Miami Heat took their third win of the season at the expense of the Brooklyn Nets 106-93. Bam Adebayo had 24 points and 9 rebounds to lead the Heat as they sent the preseason title favorites to 2 and 3 in the standings. Kevin Durant finished with 25 points and 11 rebounds in the losing effort. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Lakers squandered a 26-point lead to give the Oklahoma City Thunder their first win of the season, 123-115. The Lakers, who led by as much as 26 points, allowed OKC to come roaring back in the second half. LA also missed on several potential game-tying triples in the final moments of the game as they were dealt with their third loss for the season. Meanwhile, here are the other scores in today's NBA games. Time for another quick break. When we return, thousands tried to make a last-minute visit to their departed loved ones ahead of the week-long closure of cemeteries. And already decided which music to put on your Facebook profile? The Facebook giant has finally rolled out the feature here in the Philippines. The details after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. An influx of Filipinos took their last chances to visit loved ones before the week-long closure of cemeteries nationwide.
Though a cemetery official clarifies cremations and burials will go on as usual during the shutdown, JC Cosico with the details.
Tens of thousands flocked to the Manila North Cemetery ahead of its closure from October 29 to November 3. Medical frontliner Rolando said Thursday's his only free day to visit his late sibling.
Oo, busy. Maraming pasyente, sir.
Okay, so ngayon lang.
Oo, kaya ito lang time ko na para mapuntahan siya.
Others opted to go virtual, like Jenny's relatives who are all in the States.
Kahit umuwi kayo, hindi na rin kayo makapasok. At least kahit paano, makita nila yung mga kamag-anak namin na mayapa.
At least 100 policemen have been deployed inside to enforce health protocols. They also inspected belongings and confiscated prohibited items like lighters and cigarettes. Some parents, meanwhile, still brought their children with them, despite an ongoing ban. This group of teenagers joining a burial tried to barge in. Some kids were seen playing inside without masks. The management, however, noted that they're actually among the cemetery's inhabitants waiting to be relocated.
Almost 60% na po yung aming na-clear at nahinto po kami ng panahon po ng pandemic. Kaya hindi pa po namin talaga totally nalinis po ang sementeryo.
Flower vendors, meanwhile, were forced to slash prices leading to closing time, so as not to waste their merchandise.
Kesa po magkulang kami ng bulaklak, mag-uulam na lang kami kahit isda, mabenta lang.
Director Rosel Castañeda clarified cremations and burials would go on as usual during the week-long moratorium. Visits will be allowed once again after the closure. For News 5, JC Cosico, we are One News.
The Tourism Department announced LGUs that are no longer requiring COVID-19 testing for travelers. As of October 24, Cebu Province, Lapu-Lapu City, and Catbalogan City no longer require RT-PCR or antigen testing for its visitors. Meanwhile, Bohol, Iloilo City, and Negros Occidental require vaccination certificates acquired through VaxCert-PH instead of a negative swab test result. Fully vaccinated individuals need to present a vaccination card in Clark Freeport Zone, Subic Bay Freeport Zone, and Tarlac, as well as Masbate, Southern Leyte, Tacloban City, Maasin City, and Misamis Oriental.
In world news, for the first time, the U.S. has issued a non-binary passport. First recipient was Navy veteran Dana Zim, who got to declare their gender as X. Zim fought to get that right, even suing the U.S. government. Zim identifies as intersex and non-binary. Other countries already offer a third gender option on documents like Canada, Germany, Australia, and India. In Singapore, COVID infections saw an unusual surge with 5,234 new cases. That's the highest on record yet for the country. The health ministry says it is still clueless as to the cause especially with 86% of the Singaporean population already fully vaccinated. ICU utilization rate is also now at 80%.
Another big story in sports. Following the success of Team Philippines in the 2019 SEA Games, the Philippine Esports Federation has set their eyes on the first ever Southeast Asia Esports Championship in Vietnam next year. The inaugural tournament will feature 3 popular esports games, namely PUBG Mobile, League of Legends Wild Rift, and Valorant. Around 52 teams representing 10 esports federations are expected to take part in the qualifiers starting this November until December. The tournament hopes to level up the quality of competition as well as promote the growth of the games in the region. This will also serve as preparation for esports athletes for the 31st SEA Games in Vietnam.
Admittedly, crush ko siya. So, papanood mo sa TV. So, nang nasa tabi na siya, hindi ako makapagsalita.
It was crush at first sight. In a tell-all interview with Bimby, former Interior Secretary admitted to being shy at first, knowing that Chris Aquino was the sister of his former boss, the late President Noynoy Aquino.
Nasa naman kami, nasa isang lugar, she would start talking to me, but si Sir nandyan, kumagalit.
Ano yung moves mo, Tito Mel, to get my mama?
Ano lang, talagang
don't shock my son.
Yeah, palagi why did you say that?
Because Viv, out of the blue, he just kissed me.
Swabe!
There.
May balls pala si Tito Mel.
Chris then showed their commitment ring and spilled the reason why she settled down with a politician.
And the fact that you try your best to make me happy. And I really feel how much you love me. That's why, parang ang tanga ko na kung pakawalan pa kita.
Nagamit at kasama mo ako sa Mumbai natin.
For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
After 3 years, Facebook has finally allowed users from the Philippines to add songs to their profiles. To let your friends know about that favorite of yours, on your profile, click the music option between live events and Did You Know. You may then choose or search for songs. The chosen song will be on your profile's music section. But if you want to really show it off, you may pin it for display below your name. For Pinoy Instagram users, they've also finally gotten access to Reels. That lets them create up to 60-second videos shareable on IG stories, DMs, news feeds, and the new Reels tab. Reels also comes with in-app video editing tools, allowing users to unleash their creativity.
Ito yung parang TikTok ng Instagram.
Parang kalahati nung binasa ko, hindi ko naintindihan.
Kanina, nagising ako, di ba? Nakita ko. So, gumawa ako ng first reel ko with my dog. Simple lang naman. And tuwan-tuwa naman ako. Kaya lang, parang naisip ko, ang dami na. Meron tayong, ano ba yan? Yung post, yung IGTV, IG Story, IG Reel. Meron pa yung may music, yung wala. Nalilito na ako.
Pero ikaw nandiyan ka sa lahat na yan. How do you manage that?
You know what? Probably, I don't know how I manage it, but you know, it does take time away from the other things. So the other platforms and marketers will probably hate me when I say I'm trying to lessen my social media use and try to be more present in real life. Baka tumatanda na rin ako.
Ako, yun din po ang rason ko.
Well, don't forget to live real life, not just in Reels.
Okay.
That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.